Body mutating psychedelic color monster. Color out of space explained in detail. In today's video, we are going to look at one of the most apt adaptations of Lovecraftian horror in the 2019 movie Color Out of Space. The film was directed by Richard Stanley and starred Nicolas Cage, Jolie Richardson, Elliot Knight, and Madeleine Arthur, amongst others. The story revolves around the Gardner family, whose farm becomes ground zero for a grand extraterrestrial mess that makes excellent use of some trippy visuals, cosmic horror, and good old-fashioned psychedelics. The final result is a film that is equal parts cruel, paranoid, and yeah, radiation poisoned. No horror film is without flaws, but what makes the Color Out of Space movie so fascinating is these flaws are overshadowed by some superb performances and a general grotesque and irregular tone that succeeds in leaving people confused about what they experienced. Richard Stanley successfully keeps things grounded in the emotional and psychological reality of a family that consists of rather unconventional people. For instance, a wannabe stoner as the elder son Benny, an avid follower of witchcraft as the daughter Lavinia, and most importantly, the Gardner couple who have moved to their countryside house to escape the hustle and bustle of city life.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
All those years in the big city, we finally got out.
The story begins in the woods located to the west of Arkham, a fictional town created by H.P. Lovecraft himself. The settlement has featured in several of his other works and remains a rather probable namesake for Gotham's Arkham Asylum. Apart from Arkham, the film features other Lovecraftian cities like Kingsport, Dunwich, Innsmouth, and Aylesbury. The narrator from the beginning is later revealed to be Ward Phillips, who was played by Elliot Knight. Interesting enough, Lovecraft's full name is Howard Phillips Lovecraft. So a nice little reference there. Anyways, Ward describes these lovely, dark, and deep woods.
There are dark, narrow glens where the trees slope fantastically.
When he went there to survey the water, he was told that the place hid something sinister within its depths. But being a hydrologist and a man of science, he initially discarded any such claims. The scene then cuts to the bank of a lake where Lavinia Gardner was performing an occult ritual to protect her mother, Teresa. This rite called upon the archangels Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Michael, who are mentioned in the Book of the Watchers. Apart from symbolizing the four elements of nature, the etymology of their names signifies that God heals. He is the source of strength, he is the light, and no one is like God. Basically, it tries to say that no one apart from God can be the light that brings healing and strength. However, Lavinia's ritual gets interrupted by Ward Phillips, which causes an adverse effect later on because it inverted the ceremony, leading to the summoning of weakness and disease instead of healing and strength. Ward has come to the town to survey the water and land because Arkham's mayor is planning to build a massive reservoir that would solve much of the water problems for the surrounding areas. In fact, the mayor wanted to purchase the Gardner farm at one point, but Nathan Gardner didn't want to let go of his father's property. After her ritual, Lavinia returns home, only to meet her father at the front porch. He seems to be a loving dad who treats his children with care. We also get to meet Teresa Gardner, a bit of an overprotective mother, but a good woman nonetheless. Lavinia gets to put the horse in the barn, where Benny had been smoking pot. Nathan moved his family to the countryside, and naturally, their lives have changed drastically because of it. While Nathan cooks for the family at times, Teresa manages to work from her makeshift office upstairs. The kids, including little Jack, are appreciative of what their parents are doing, and everyone is happy.
Don't say it.
Just what time it is.
Time for you to do the dishes.
Mr. and Mrs. Gardner are living their dream, a dream that both of them once saw. Nathan made quite a few changes to the farm so that it becomes more comfortable. But among other things, he took to growing fruits and vegetables, and even does alpaca farming. As the night spread its cloak around the town of Arkham, a brilliantly glowing meteorite came from the depths of the sky and crashed on the Gardner farm. The meteorite had a magenta hue around it. Teresa stays behind with Jack while the others go to inspect what caused the rattling and intense bright light. They find a glowing rock with smoke coming out of it and emitting an obnoxious odor that only Nathan can smell. The family theorizes many things behind the strange rock, including the Russians or the Chinese. They don't let go of the possibility that it could be debris from space. However, Jack goes mute due to the shock and horror of the event he just witnessed, but snaps out of it soon, complaining of a headache.
My head hurts.
Okay, honey. Look, let's get you upstairs. I'll put you...
The following day, the mayor and the sheriff arrive at the ranch to inspect the events from the previous night, but they have no clue to what the reality was. All they knew was that it came from beyond, a staple of most of Lovecraft's horror stories. Ward also lands up to the spot where he meets Lavinia. He jokingly asks if the meteorite crashed into her yard because of the ritual from the previous day, but the viewer does feel that was more of a joke. Lavinia had been trying to connect with mystical forces that she didn't quite understand using the NECRONOMICON, or the Book of Dead Names. It's another Lovecraftian invention, and first appeared in the short story titled The Hound. It's basically a test of witchcraft and black magic that contains knowledge about ancient deitic races, including the Great Old Ones, or Outer Gods. These beings don't just conquer stars, but also lived in other dimensions, and the spells and rituals of the book help to open portals for those entities to return from the other realms. Oh, Lavinia, what did you do? Benny has been a science geek and suspects that the meteorite is radioactive, or may contain an otherworldly virus. Well, Benny, you're not entirely wrong there. While milking the alpacas, Nathan tells Ward about the super stoner Ezra, who lives off the grid in his solar-powered dinghy house with security cameras and everything.
There's Ezra, our squatter, but he keeps to himself. Haven't seen him in months.
Would it be okay if I talk with him?
You can try.
Benny takes Ward to Ezra, played by Tommy Chung. Oh, that's some good casting there, you know what I mean? It turns out Ezra already knows all about Ward, and he explains,
Got a little birdie flitting around here in this ecosphere.
Ward notices that there's something already wrong with Arkham's water, but he isn't sure what. That night, the meteorite started to draw the lightning towards itself. Several bolts hit straight into the alien rock and destroyed it. However, the destruction of the rock led its constituents to seep into the bottom of the earth and mix with the underground water table. Meanwhile, while testing the oily water collected from Ezra's place, he notices that his litmus test went reddish, signaling the presence of a high amount of acidic substances in the liquid. Interestingly, the lightning that struck the rock was also magenta in color, signifying that something about the weather that night was not natural. It is now that the pace starts to pick up. The first indication of the supernatural is witnessed when Ward's radio gets distorted and loses its signal. He gets a phone call, but the voice from the other side becomes entirely static and incomprehensible. His car engine starts on its own and begins roaring before abruptly shutting off. Something was affecting the electricity of the area. The next day, Mr. and Mrs. Gardner noticed that the stone was gone. Suddenly, the place becomes rich in flora and fauna, like new exotic plants and lizards with magenta stripes on them. Later that day, the media came to the Gardner farm, but found no evidence of the rock, and Nathan was discarded. While preparing dinner that night, Teresa lost her senses. She not only used some really bloody eggs for the meal, but also chopped her own fingers off while cutting the carrots. Nathan rushes her to the hospital, puts Benny in charge of the house, and asks him to get the alpacas out of the barn by 10 o'clock. The following day, Lavinia sees the alpacas out in the open, but Benny claimed he did not put them there. The absent-mindedness and alliteration in Psyche was just the beginning of the horrifying events that were about to plague the Gardner family and the rest of Arkham Woods. Meanwhile, Jack becomes fixated on the well on the farm, intrigued by the newly formed plant growth and exotic insects. He tells Lavinia that he's been talking to his new friends.
What are you doing? Shh. It's talking to me.
Lavinia then gets a reason to believe that he might not be kidding or speaking to an imaginary person. Clearly, Jack has been the one most affected by the meteorite and whatever power the alien rock unleashed. Lavinia gets a call from her father, but it was no different from the call that Ward had received earlier, tonal and static. Jack then notices a magnificent magenta flying mantis that breaks out of an egg from the depth of the well. The bizarre-looking bug grew purple tentacles from its mouth, only to look at Jack with its psychedelic vision. We suggest you don't watch this one under the influence of marijuana. Lavinia then goes to wash the utensils left dirty with her mother's blood on them, constantly telling herself not to puke. She started the task at 11:22, but encountered a bright magenta light from behind. Soon it was 4:45, and she still hadn't finished. She receives another call, but the voice on the other end was static again. Ward comes over to Lavinia to inform her about the contamination of the water, but it was a bit too late now.
That's actually what I want to talk to you about. I think there's something wrong with the water here. It's a kind of contamination.
He then goes over to Ezra to inform him of the same, where the hippie squatter tells him that the aliens came on the rock and took refuge under the surface of the earth.
They came on the rock.
Look, no offense.
Although a heavy stoner, Ezra seems to have made more sense of the situation than any of the other folks. even a science guy like Ward. Furthermore, Ezra's cat had been missing for some time now. When Ward tells her that he would inform Ezra about her, he says,
You might see her, but I don't think you'll recognize her.
Well, he may or may not have been correct, because when Nathan and Teresa were returning from their trip to the hospital, they encountered a large mutated cat with purple adornments. The feline was definitely nothing found on Earth. Jack was once again in the field, staring deep into the violet lights that came from near the well. Meanwhile, Benny describes his own time bending to Lavinia. He had gone with the alpacas. 1 second it was daytime, and the next, it was all dark.
It was daytime, and then all of a sudden it was so dark I couldn't even find the house.
He couldn't even find the house. Naturally, the color energy from the meteorite was bending and slowing down time itself. Worried about their younger brother Jack, they go out just in time for their parents to arrive and find Jack all by himself in the yard. Nathan is already angry about this, and when he sees the alpacas still out, he loses his shit and bursts out with the other kids in an uncharacteristic rage. While showering, he notices a gelatinous blob of some kind, and upon picking the thing up, its tentacles grope Nathan's palm, effectively telling the viewer that he's screwed. Also, we notice that the color energy has started to affect the topography of the place, as Nathan's crops bore fruit a month early, but they were all rotten, and he becomes horribly agitated. Meanwhile, Teresa snaps because Nathan has not been fixing the internet problem, and she might be losing clients because of that. The skin on his hands begins to crack, and well, Nathan thought it would be best to rub a little bourbon there, because that's what the doctors prescribe for alien bites and burns. The important thing to note here is that all the people in the Gardner house have been drinking the water. Nathan in his ice cubes for his bourbon, Lavinia for her morning coffee, and of course, the alpacas are not living without water. The fateful night that we have all been waiting for is finally here. Lavinia looked through her stuff and found the paperback copy of the Necronomicon. Meanwhile, Jack and Benny go to investigate the barn, only to find out that the animals are in a hideous state, as if their skin was turned inside out. Next, they get attacked by the color energy, and they try to flee the scene. Teresa, who was looking for Jack, met them halfway and was also attacked by the energy. Hearing the commotion, Nathan came outside and was shocked to see what had happened. The bolt of color energy had merged Teresa and Jack into one entity, almost like a pair of Siamese twins. Little Jack was protruding out of his mother's back, and both of them were wailing in pain. The following day, even Nathan's car won't start, and he went into another state of uncharacteristic rage. For this scene, Nicolas Cage was inspired by the performance of Jack Nicholson from the 1970 film 5 Easy Pieces. When he gets out of his car, we get to see an aesthetically beautiful scene of his farm with purple vegetative growth all around. I mean, yeah, the meteorite created a few mental alterations and would probably destroy the Gardner family, but at least it makes the garden look pretty. Nevertheless, he returns to the house only to find that Jack and Teresa are getting hurt due to the sunlight, so he takes them to the attic with the help of Benny and Lavinia. Teresa says in a dim and wailing voice that she's thirsty, while her son, who's still attached to her back, cries like a baby. Furthermore, Jack has grown some glowing magenta energy under his facial skin and eyes. She clearly wants the water, because maybe that's the only way she could consume more of the constituents from the meteorite. Benny informs his father that something has happened to the alpacas, and he leaves with his shotgun to the barn. In a clear reference to the thing, the alpacas had merged with each other, just like the dog thing from Carpenter's work. Back at the house, Teresa groans that she's hungry. The scene is hard to watch, not just because of Teresa's state, but also because the children have started to give up on their mother by now. Nathan returns back after massacring the alpacas, and he asks the children to get out of the attic.
Get out.
He wants to euthanize Teresa to end her misery and pain, but he couldn't bring himself to commit the task. Yes, he has further lost his mind, but some sanity still rests within him. Later that night, Benny and Lavinia conspire to leave the house on their horse, Comet. However, turns out that Comet's eyes also have a magenta hue, and he runs away before they can do anything. Their plan is now foiled, as walking on foot through 12 miles of ancient woods was definitely not the best of ideas. Suddenly, Benny heard the voice of their dog Sam coming from the well, and he goes down to retrieve him. But then, huge tentacles of brilliant magenta light engulfed Benny while he was inside the well, assimilating him with the energy. Hearing Lavinia's shrieks, a completely demented Nathan comes out and takes her to the well and drags Lavinia into the house. He locks his daughter in the attic with Teresa and Jack, who are far from humanoid and had turned highly aggressive. She looks arachnid and was walking on multiple limbs. The sheriff and Ward happened to arrive just in time because they had previously seen the fused mass of Nathan's alpacas. The two of them were greeted by Nathan, who pretended that everything was normal. After hearing Lavinia's screams, they rush to the attic and break the door. Nathan finally shot his extremely monstrous and inhuman wife to save his daughter, whom he himself put in that situation. Ward picked up Lavinia and walked out of the door towards the sheriff's car to get her help. Just then, Nathan saw that the color energy was coming up once again and aimed towards it. The sheriff thought that Nathan was pointing his gun at Ward and shot him. After this, Ward and the sheriff left to evacuate Ezra, only to find his desiccated corpse and an audio recording that he had left behind. Ezra here explains that the thing from the meteorite took over everything that lived, and those who drank the water. The thing got strong on them by feeding on them. Ezra's body was decomposing, but glowing with the magenta light under his skin. Freaked out by another incident with the color energy, the sheriff and Ward flee the place, but the sheriff gets pulled up by sentient tree branches that assimilate him with themselves. Ezra's recording also revealed that the entity wanted to transform Earth into something else, into... Ward then turns to Lavinia, only to find her possessed by the color energy. It exploded out of the well, funneled into the sky like a brilliantly luminous tornado, and took over the entire landscape. Ward looks at Lavinia deep into her eyes, and his eyes too become purple. He is then transported into a vision of the place from where the color energy had come. It was a psychedelic planet where tentacled aliens and monsters lived. He was in this vision just before Lavinia exploded and disintegrated into fragments. The magenta tornado stretched high into the sky, almost merging with it, which became exuberant and psychedelic. By this point, the alien color energy was unleashing its full wrath upon the woods of Arkham and the Gardner farmhouse. Ward pulled himself together and headed toward the house with extreme struggle and unbreakable determination as space and time began to unravel. Arriving inside, he was awaited by a murderous and reanimated Nathan who pursues him. However, Ward managed to get inside the cellar and save himself from Nathan's rage. Ward waits there as the color energy's distortion of time and reality drove the property to its ultimate destruction, leaving nothing but ashen bones. Ward became the only survivor of the ordeal. In the epilogue, we learn that the mayor's plan of building the dam had come to fruition, the water of which covered the farm. He knows that the color entity was probably gone, but he swears never to drink the water from the dam. As the film ends, we see the same magenta flying mantis that had come out from the egg in the well. Is it over yet? Well, it's Lovecraftian cosmic horror, and such questions are almost never answered. The psychedelic color monster. Now you should know that the color used to represent the alien entity is magenta, which doesn't exist as a unique wavelength in the visible light spectrum dispersed through a prism. It is an extraspectral color that humans perceive through a particular interaction of the optical rods of the eyes that detect blue and red light in specific circumstances. Basically, red and blue lights get blended to give out a magenta color. Furthermore, red and blue are often attributed to evil and good, respectively. However, magenta is a unique blend of these two hues, and therefore, the film seems to suggest that the alien entity is beyond the concepts of good and evil, or maybe it is simultaneously evil and good. In the climax, when Ward looks into Lavinia's eyes, he shares a vision with her of the color monster's homeworld. It is a rocky planet that is filled with tentacles of all kinds, sizes, and shapes. However, there is no known purple star in the universe. Therefore, it's quite a possibility that the exoplanet belongs to a whole new universe or realm. Do you remember how the Necronomicon opens portals to other realms? Naturally, this possible extra-universe planet follows entirely different laws of physics. For instance, the solar waves of the sun don't follow the gravitational laws that are otherwise known to be universal in nature. This explains the several abilities and powers of the color energy, like controlling time. It is able to shrink time so that it can travel from its own planet to Earth through a black hole. Furthermore, it dilates to confuse Lavinia and Benny and to push them further towards insanity. It also has the ability to alter and manipulate different forms of energy and waves such as television, internet, and phone signals, as well as sound energy itself to send static tones. It also controls electromagnetic energy, as we noticed how it was able to start Ward's car or make Nathan's own vehicle dysfunctional. It can successfully attract lightning bolts towards it so that it could release its horde into the groundwater to spread easily and undetected. After dispersing through water, it took a parasitic form and thrived on the energy of those it infected, getting more robust in the process. The color is highly intelligent and sentient, and we learn this because it was talking to Jack through whistles. Jack clearly understood whatever the color was telling him, because the little kid was seen laughing and smiling in the scenes with Lavinia and Ward. Due to the color's possible radioactivity, it appears that the alpacas were either burned before or after their assimilation. By the end of the film, the color either took Lavinia with itself, which would explain its teleportation capabilities, or was simply destructive enough to kill her and every other life form, leaving behind gray ash only. However, its most wonderful and psychedelic power has to be the ability to transform and alter the environment. Due to it, flowers changed their appearance, new vegetation cropped up, and vegetables ripened before their time, albeit inedible. It also mutates living beings like insects and alpacas. Oh, that magenta flying mantis with all those tentacles. Beautiful. Some of you must be wondering, how did we deduce that the color used a black hole to travel from its planet to Earth? Well, when Benny was in his bedroom inspecting a black hole on his computer, it can be seen that something left the black hole and headed specifically towards Earth. Ready for a bit of a science lesson? Well, color is nothing but a specific wavelength of visible light that has no matter or mass, and it is just the impression of the reflected light ray. Since it has no mass, it is independent of gravity, and they are known as black holes because they have a strong gravitational pull and act as a massive sink for any object with mass. So without a gravitational pull, it can travel through black holes, which are believed to facilitate travel through space-time. Recent data shows that black holes do in fact absorb light as well, but let's not go there and make this any more of a science class. This brings us to the end of the explanation of this beautifully and aptly adapted film of Lovecraft's short story, The Color Out of Space. As for director Richard Stanley, he has mentioned that this film was the first of a trilogy of Lovecraftian adaptations. He is hoping to continue with the novella The Dunwich Horror, given the fact that Stanley used a plethora of Lovecraftian references and remained grounded in the source material. Marvelous Videos couldn't be more excited.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.